Hi designers and artists, I'm Mrs. Hamby and welcome to your very first video that's designed for both graphic design and exploratory art. Today we're going to be using a photo that you've taken yourself, a landscape photo, and Sketchbook Pro to create your own digital drawing. You'll need your iPad, Sketchbook Pro, your landscape photo, and you might want a stylus like this one here. You're going to be layering on top of your landscape photo, working in a traditional method, working from back to front, large to small. And what this looks like is starting with the background. So I'm going to turn on this layer so you can see it. In this case, I put in the sky and the ocean. Then adding in the middle ground. And you can see here that I added the largest things first. The largest areas of green trees, the largest area of the road, etc. And then I started working on some detailed shadows. I like to work in many layers, so I added another layer with more detailed shadows. And then I added another layer with the highlights. And you can see that working this way gives you an impressionistic type of illustration. But by just layering those colors together, you get something that's very accurate, focusing on the colors and the texture of the landscape. So let's get started. You need to open up Sketchbook Pro and go to your gallery. You're going to start a new composition. You want to click on this option here, which allows you to customize the size of your canvas. You want a lot of layers available to you, but also the maximum number of pixels. So if you slide this around, you'll see that the larger the pixels, the lower the number of layers. So we want it right around 1770 so that we can still have 12 layers. Next, you're going to import your picture. So come up to your Layers panel and click the flower with the plus to add a photograph. You need to have saved your landscape photograph in your photo library. Then once you've added your photo, you're going to use the transform tool and a two-fingered touch to rotate and enlarge your photograph so that it fits on your canvas. Since we're working on a square canvas, you might notice that you'll have some extra space, either on the side or going across the top or the bottom. That's okay because this is a good area to use as a palette to test out your colors or to test out different brushes before you start drawing right on top of the photograph. The main thing that you need to focus on in this project is working in layers. So make sure that you're always adding a new layer on top of your photograph so that you don't end up drawing on the photograph and losing the detailed information that was there. You're going to start with the background, which should include the sky and in my case includes some ocean. You're going to want to use a fairly large soft brush. So something like this brush, turn the radius up and the opacity down. Then there's a really cool tool in Sketchbook Pro that allows you to pick up the color off of a photograph. So by holding down on the surface of the image, you get this target and you can see that it will pick up whatever color that you're touching. We're going to start with the medium blue. Always start with the medium color. Make sure that you're working on, not on the photograph, but on another layer. And then you're going to fill in the sky. This brush is actually a little bit small, but it will work for what I'm doing. And now that I've covered up the photo to where I can't see the details, I want to turn down the opacity of this layer so that I can see through it enough to add other details. I can also turn the visibility of the layer off for a moment to pick up another color. Maybe make my brush a little bit larger and a little bit softer, that way it will blend very nicely. Again, make sure I turn the visibility back on so that I'm working on this layer. And then blend a little bit of that darker blue in the top of the sky. Drawing and painting is all about patience, and so the more patience you have and the more you're willing to add details, the more realistic your painting is going to look. Alright, and then you can see here in the thumbnail how I've added that color. Again, if I was more patient and had a bigger brush, I could blend that a little bit more. I could also pick up the lighter blue that is down here towards the horizon, and I would also want to pick up the purplish gray that is in the clouds. And I would just continue this process of turning the visibility off, picking up the color, adding in those details, and then turning the visibility back on and adding in the details. When you're done with the background, you're going to add another layer and start working on your foreground, and you're going to use the same method. So you're going to pick up the medium value that you see. In this case, everything is very dark, but there is some medium green in here. And then using a very large brush, you could just fill in this area that is these trees. And you'll notice I'm using a different method, a different type of mark making to signify there's a different texture here. I could also use a different brush. You have lots of brushes available to you in Sketchbook Pro. Make sure you pay attention to what the medium values are in the different areas. For instance, right here where the trees, where there's some sky showing through the trees, I would want to maybe switch the brush to be very transparent, make it smaller. I might even change the shape of the brush. And you have lots of options available to you here. Some leaves, that's kind of interesting. And so I could test out putting those in this area. That's actually kind of nice. There we go. And that way, because this layer is on top of the background layer, the blue of the sky is going to show through. And like I mentioned, you're working big to small, so we want to start with the largest areas. Then you could pick up a lighter green or a darker green and start adding those in. We also have the gray of the road here and a little bit of tan for the building and the hill. And I'm trying to work from what's farthest away to what's closest. In my case, the middle ground kind of comes forward on its own, but you might have something that's even closer, so you could add another layer on top of that. I'm going to switch back to my final example to show you what it should look like when it's finished. So here again is my example, and you can see it's almost finished. I have a few more highlights to add over in this area, and maybe a little bit of detail on the building. But I've blended the sky very smoothly. I've even added texture in the ocean. I've used different brushes. You need to use at least 2 different brushes. I used a very large soft brush for the sky, and then I used a textured brush for the leaves here. I've worked back to front using different layers, big to small, starting with the largest areas and then adding in the detailed shadows and the detailed highlights. Alright, I hope you have fun with this project, and I look forward to seeing your landscape drawings.